Hi, everybody. Welcome to HMH Agency's Future of Transportation podcast. I'm John Halpin, and on this show, we host a regular series of chats with experts in the transportation industry. This episode is going to be a little different. Usually there's one guest. As you can see if you're watching, we have three guests here today to discuss transportation issues, some of them related to the federal government's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, which is what I'm going to use for the rest of the show because that full name is a mouthful. It was passed in November 2021. Joining me today, first, JonMichael, Assistant Director of the Austin, Texas Transportation Department. How you doing, Jason?
Doing great, John.
Rob Silverberg, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for State and Local Government at Dell Technologies. Thanks for being here, Rob.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to it.
Me too. And Sajid Khan, Senior Director of Business Strategy and Marketing for the Smart Cities and Transportation Group at Intel. Sajid, thank you for joining us. And I want to thank you for this because the idea for this podcast started when my HMH colleagues and I talked with you about an upcoming ebook from Intel that relates to the IIJA. Can you give us a quick sneak preview of what's going to be in that?
Yeah. So as you air this, the ebook should actually be available. And you'll be able to find it first on LinkedIn and subsequently on Intel.com, and we're hoping to sort of socialize it more broadly. So as you mentioned, John, the infrastructure bill, November 15th, got passed into law. And as those of us that are in the cities and transportation space sort of looked at it, it's like, wow, this is sort of I think the official word was once in a lifetime opportunity. Many of us looked at it, agreed. We were like, it's certainly a once in a career opportunity. So we had a conversation with a few folks, both external and internal, decided to gather up some pertinent information regarding the technology components of what is possible with the infrastructure bill. So sort of the core idea, and we're calling the ebook the IIJA sort of ebook transportation edition, because there's pieces of IIJA that are not transportation, but about roughly half of it is. So what we are hoping to attempt to do with it is convey this idea that infrastructure is not a static thing. It changes over time, and that today infrastructure is both physical and digital. And we're moving on from there, and just to make it sort of as practical, as useful as possible to cities, to transportation entities, we have a list of about 100 plus transportation-related solutions in the spend areas that IIJA is focused on.
Okay. All right, so we're going to dig into this a little deeper, and the IIJA for everyone. There's plenty of online resources. I'm not going to share screens because a lot of you are just listening, but it addresses roads and bridges and power infrastructure and passenger and freight rail and broadband and drinking water. I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's all over the place, but there are a lot of layers to it, a lot of different elements. From a transportation standpoint, Rob, I'm going to let you go first. What transportation sectors do you think could stand to benefit most from federal investment? Like I said, there's a wide variety of things that this bill addresses. What do you think kind of are the sweet spots for what could be helped the most?
Sure. Let me start with some definitions to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So there's departments of transportation at the state level, the local level as well, primarily focused on transportation infrastructure, roads and bridges, things that make the city run, traffic signals, all that good stuff. Then there's also transit. And transit is a major part of transportation. You've got buses, you've got rail, you've got all the different transit systems that operate in the community. And then you've also got airports as well as a transportation means. So if you look across the spectrum of departments of transportation, transit agencies, airports, I think every group within this broader transportation landscape can benefit from IIJA. However, I'll say that right now, if you look at transit, they're very focused on technology and how technology can improve the way bus systems operate, rail systems operate. I think airports are also very eager to take on innovative technologies. And where I think we need to make the most, I would say, impact is with the infrastructure side of it, the departments of transportation that could build, a street, a highway, or a bridge, or they could build a smart, connected digital street, highway, or bridge. So the biggest opportunity is that moving from standard steel and concrete to connected and intelligent infrastructure.
So, Jason, I think that tees you right up to, based on what Rob said, of how the city of Austin, where you are, could potentially benefit. What about, let's say, what he said? It kind of rings a bell in your head and thinks, yeah, that's something that's going to really be helped here.
Absolutely. Thank you, John, and thank you, Rob and Sajid, for getting us to this point. But yeah, I would say that there's a lot of potential opportunity, right? And across all landscapes within transportation, and it doesn't just involve transportation. You got to look at what transportation does to a city, right? As a city grows, transportation in a lot of ways, roads, bridges to connect new neighborhoods, to restitch old neighborhoods, to bring things back together again from an era of transportation planning that maybe was not as equitable as it was in the beginning. And so when I look at IIJA as a city of Austin executive, what I see is I see everything that we just mentioned, but I see new things that are from old reauthorizations that I've seen in my 30 years of working in this part of transportation. And that is the level of human-centered focus related to some of the other qualifying factors of how you would get access to this particular money. And to me, that is really the once in a lifetime pivotal shift that's happening with how our federal government is looking to invest in this. And let's be honest, of the sizable amount that it is, it still doesn't cover every funded need out there, right? The money is there to really help provide the needed momentum to get us moving into what I call transportation 4.0, or getting us to a point where we're using technology in addition to the physical environment to create that cyber physical connection so that we can do a lot more with the limited resources that we have. Cities, different departments of transportation continue to deal with workforce issues. And we're seeing a need to be more sophisticated with the way that we go about delivering our services to the public. In fact, part of it, if you'll notice, is about understanding how transportation, for instance, is not necessarily utility, but needs to be a consumer or customer focused solution for our nation. And so, because why? Transportation users tend to use the system and not really have a connection, right? A relationship with the provider in order to sustainably and responsibly use those assets. But customers, on the other hand, customers give us the opportunity to do that. And then lastly, I would say is that don't forget about all the communications components within IIJA. I don't want to spoil anybody's stuff, but think about the fact that of what happened over the last 2 years. And I would definitely say that communications is the next, if not the last, mode of transportation.
Sajid, I'm going to let you go from there. I mean, that's a really interesting point that Jason made about, when you think about infrastructure, it's, you talked about the physical and digital. I think it was the phrase you used possibly at that. Yeah. And you think of infrastructure, it's like, bridges, roads, and, train tracks and stuff like that. And that's kind of old school, but, we've kind of moved into a different realm here, and communication and, broadband, things like that are a big factor, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So just going back to a little bit of your previous question as well, the bill is kind of broken up into what they're describing in the bill, and there's a lot of third-party, just analyses of the bill. It's a lot of pages, so I think most of us know that. But it's broken up into transportation, surface transportation, and core infrastructure. And the transportation elements that Rob and Jason are alluding to, and I've got a couple of numbers handy here. It's 1.2 trillion is the total bill. 571 billion is what we're talking about for transportation over 10 years, right? And while I was in Austin, we went into a Pete Buttigieg sort of keynote, town hall style keynote at South by Southwest, and his perspective was that this summer is when we'll start seeing construction and real stuff starting to happen, but this is a 10-year cycle. And to Jason's point, there's so much that needs to happen. This is a fantastic opportunity, but it's a big country as well. Now, with regards to the physical and digital, John, that you were talking about, right? This is very true, right? So digital technologies have evolved so much, so fast, in the last 50 years, 30 years, 10 years. 3 years, right? So you've got IoT, you've got 5G, cloud, AI, the combination of all these technologies, right, that go into products from companies like Dell that then get stitched together by Dell, by system integrators, by cities, et cetera. That's what, in our estimation, will deliver sort of those outcomes that we're all looking for. So the physical part is absolutely necessary. That's going to be the lion's share of the spend, right? Highways, bridges, airports, railways, all these fantastic things. But a layer of digital technology will drive the outcomes that I think Jason started to allude to.
Okay. Jason, I want to go back to you because I was going to ask about, the principles that might guide the investments here. And you talked about, I don't want to, speak out of turn here, human focused, sort of basically a more, making sure that it's targeted to the people who need to receive it. Was that a good way of putting that? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Very good way of putting that. Certainly. I mean, in a lot of times and in the history, I would say, of looking at transportation engineering as a whole, we definitely make sure to keep the human in mind, but there's been a traditional focus on the asset, right? On how we deliver the asset for people to use, without maybe understanding all the time, especially as things have changed, how human behavior and what their needs are, and making sure that we're finding ways to make sure that the assets are helping those needs. And so it's just simple human-centered design. It sounds simple on in concept, but then putting it into action, I think, is where it gets really interesting as far as how do you go into a particular community that may have been disproportionately affected by previous transportation projects that have not the level of trust that you would expect with the government of how they have missed out on opportunities. How do you go into those communities and help them? Because that's where the IIJA is really focused, right? We see that in the act and in the bill. So the methodologies of doing this require cities. It requires municipal effort to get that close, right? A lot of people will, if they have a problem in our transportation system, they do not call up one of my 2 senators in the state of Texas. They call up one of my council members. And so I think it's important to understand that cities play an incredibly important role in helping the entire community and communities around the nation move together with this. We can't do it just with government and private sector and infrastructure. We need everyone out there to understand something that one of my mentors once told me. Everyone out there needs to understand their spatial and temporal impact on the transportation system. Think of yourself like a packet in a network. Are you creating a broadcast storm and creating issues in that network, or are you being a meaningful packet moving through that network in a most appropriate manner?
Okay. So, Jason, you mentioned the different sectors weighing in. You're in the public sector. Rob and Sajid, you're in the private sector. Rob, how do you see your company and other companies helping deliver on the promise of the IIJA and the stuff that Jason talked about?
Great question. Let me start with the infrastructure aspect of it, the roads and the bridges, the traffic signals. There's already been a move to start getting these standard, say, assets, as Jason calls them, connected. So as you rebuild a road or rebuild a bridge, you start to lay fiber. And you start to lay that connectivity, whether that be full conduit along the side of a highway, or whether that be microtrenching in a neighborhood or in a city like Austin. So connectivity is the first piece. And then the second piece is, once you have that connectivity, which could be, based on a fiber backbone, but potentially also wireless in nature, leveraging modern 5G technologies, leveraging high-speed connectivity that allows you to do new and different things. And then you look at how you're going to make them more intelligent. And the more intelligent side is where we're leaning in, if you will, by putting more compute resources at the edge of the network out in the environment. You can actually process sensor data in real time and react more rapidly to changing conditions as they occur. So take a common scenario. You've got an intersection in the city and there's a traffic accident. how quick can you respond to that traffic accident? How quick can you be notified of what that traffic accident is? And how can you bring the right resources from the city to alleviate both the congestion and potentially any injured people? So that intelligence and that edge compute can give us, I would say, a lot of advantages in this new connected transportation model. So where Dell is leaning in, where Intel's leaning in, is we're trying to provide that edge intelligence as well as the analytics capabilities to give cities like Austin new insights.
Okay. Sajid, can you expand on that a little bit? Like where Intel, for instance, might fit in with something like that?
Sure, absolutely. So I would agree with everything Rob said. First off, right? These are the types of opportunities. These are the types of things that will create the change we're looking to create. Now, in terms of Intel as a company, we're at a different sort of we're in a different stage of the sort of the value chain, if you will, right? So we are an ingredient supplier. So the CPUs, the silicon that you find in Dell boxes and servers, gateways, all these different 5G, all these different capabilities, that's where we play. So we've sort of prided ourselves on a horizontal business model, right? So open standards, which is for those of the listeners that may not be like technologists, all that means is that the widgets that we create or we attempt to kind of make them all work seamlessly one with the other as they come together, right? So there's open standards, they're kind of modular, it's a building block style approach. There's end-to-end security that we try to really focus on to make these solutions secure. And then there's the ecosystem of partners, right? Dell's a great partner for many years, but we have, if Dell's looking for support with ISVs, software players, or from an entity that can go deploy stuff to augment maybe some of the capability there, right? So all of these things, bringing that together with Intel building blocks inside these products is a key piece of what we are looking to do. Now, beyond that, we do collaborate around solutions, around kind of making all this come together. But that's sort of where Intel is coming from. I'm an Intel guy. You got the logo behind me, so I got to talk about Moore's law. It's just one of those things that we have to do. So Moore's law is this notion of every so often, I think 18 months or so, your capability doubles, and that's at the core of a lot of innovation, we believe, right? There's obviously a lot of other things that need to happen, the systems, the software, all those types of things, but that is still a pivotal piece of it that we're bringing into the mix, and we are leaning in just from a understanding of what can be done, working with city officials, working hand in hand with Dell to bring other ideas together as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go off script just a little bit. If you three guys were going to work together on something that, an investment from this bill that could benefit the city of Austin, how does it work? Does Jason go to Rob, who then goes to Sajid, or does who initiates the, hey, here's what we should do kind of thing? Jason, I'll let you take that one. Yeah.
Okay. I think it starts, and again, I think it starts with making sure that we're having open conversations. Open standards yields open collaboration, right? And so having that open collaboration about what the city needs, and we're doing that today, right? As we were talking before the podcast, both Rob and Sajid, we have a relationship. We're working on pilots together in the city of Austin today, and that's part of it, right? Is understanding what the capabilities of the next generation technologies are going to be. Having a partner at a city like us, a smart mobility office that has the capability and the indoctrination by our policymakers to move forward boldly and pilot new technologies. So first and foremost, it's about being bold and getting out there and trying new things. And then from what we learn from trying those new things is what we as a city begin to understand what are the next things that we need to buy in order to support these new emerging services. Because this is all about delivering more service faster, real time, and more location based to the people that love coming and either visiting and working in Austin. And so it starts there. and then we begin to build it out over time. I love the way that we run our pilots with my partners here, because we great opportunity for us both to learn. I spent 25 years in the private sector before deciding to leave that behind and come to the city of Austin to help it with this particular very pivotal time, right? In any city in the United States, in the world, for instance, too. And so then the next steps is we both go away and we learn from that, right? My private sector partners have direct experience of seeing it work on a live environment with real people. This is not in a lab. This is not in a controlled campus or anything like that. It's real world information that then allows both of us to iterate our roadmaps and our designs to a more collective and integrated future. And then it does start with the cities. We have to set forward the policy and put some resources behind that, or at least innovative delivery mechanisms with some limited resources that we have, in order to deliver the next generation of what is Web 3.0 and what will be financial systems 3.0. Those are the things that are those next steps towards what we're doing. I say that transportation is in 4.0 only because the very first transportation mode we had was if you slip down, you're 2 feet. And so I would say that we're now heading into this new era where it is enabling the edge. The edge is incredibly important to everyone, none the least of which would be the people out there that both Sajid and Rob and I are trying to serve.
Okay. I'm trying to be mindful at time, so I'm going to go to the next question here, and I'm going to share my screen real quick.
I do want to chime in with just one quick comment
Sure.
on that, John, before you move on, right? And the one quick comment is, I know we're talking about digital tech, CPU solutions. I do want to make one point clear, which is this is about people. I think going back to the point that Jason was making, right? So it's about what does the city need, what do the people need, and what set of assets do we bring together, physical and digital, in order to serve that need, right?
Yep.
So I just want to make that one point clear, that even though we are excited about it, technology, we're deferring to the cities, to the people, to kind of make sure that there's a fit here.
Rob, go ahead.
Comment as well. Yeah, I want to jump in here. It is
Sure.
about people, and it's about outcomes, and it's about the outcomes that technology can bring. So, the tech's not what's important. What's important is the improvements that we can make to the way traffic flows, reducing accidents, improving the way bus systems run, rail systems run. So if you focus on the outcomes, and if you focus on, as Jason said, your technology partners to bring you the innovations that lead to those outcomes, that's where I think that partnership works well. Because cities don't know all the solutions. They don't know all the AI algorithms that could be out there, and they don't know the partnerships and the software providers and systems integrators that they should be leveraging. So that's where my team and myself and and Dell can help. We can come in with that expertise and help guide.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see it? If folks, if you're only listening, sorry, I'll try to we're looking at a summary of the IIJA spending. The biggest chunk is roads and bridges. There's power infrastructure, a lot of stuff here, and I know there's a lot of sub details we could go into. Rob, I'm going to let you start with this. Is there anything, if you were crafting an infrastructure bill in the year 2022, I don't want any of you to throw anyone under the bus, but is there stuff here that you kind of go, I don't know if I would have, we could have taken from spot A and put more into spot B?
Gosh, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
The one that sticks out on me as being sort of, a square peg in this one is, things like drinking water and water storage and how that relates to transportation. It's very, very important, definitely.
Yep.
But I don't know if it falls in this bucket. Very important things, but maybe not as transportation related as the others.
Right. Jason, next, anything jump out at you here, good or bad?
Well, I think, you look at the distribution. I think that's what's really interesting. I mean, let's remember when the majority, and this is a federal initiative, so let's remember when the majority of our asphalt and concrete ended up getting laid down, right? It was the Eisenhower era. That was designed to meet a lot of needs, in an era of the United States where we're also trying to protect our homeland, and we're using the interstate system to make up for a lot of lost time. And what we're seeing in this is the need for that generational investment that we didn't have for a little while, right? And when you look at roads and bridges, and if you travel in the United States, we're at a point where we need to reinvest in some critical infrastructure. So what I see in here, a lot of critical infrastructure components that help strengthen our mobility system. Our mobility system nationally is not just for you and I to get to Disneyland, but it's to make sure that we can protect the homeland, right? And so what I also see in that, and the reason I think that some of the water elements are in there, is because water has always been something that we need to secure better, and make sure that we're protecting in some kind of way. And so I do think that when you look at drinking water, the purification of water and soil, for instance, it gets to the equation of how are we building our infrastructure systems today? What types of non-renewable resources are we using to input into that? And ultimately, what is the carbon footprint of new infrastructure as we begin to build it? We would obviously want it to be as carbon neutral, if not negative, if we can. So if we're going to put solar on the side of interstates, how does that solar also help with indigenous species, water reclamation, other things like that, right? Especially considering just the act of cleaning solar panels takes a decent amount of resources in order to clean them correctly, right? Keep the dust off of them, those kind of things. So when you look at this, I would look at it from the perspective of the distribution of money should tell you where our largest needs are.
Got it. Sajid, you want to chime in on anything? Just same question as everybody else.
Yeah. So a couple quick comments, right? So the way this slide reads is sort of a stack ranking of all the spend areas. But if you actually look at the bill, it's chunked into transportation. Surface transportation is what they're calling it, and core infrastructure. So core infrastructure, broadband, drinking water, storage, et cetera, falls into that bucket. So it sort of is laid out in that fashion. Now, within the transportation pieces, which is what this conversation is about, right? And where the spending is, where it should be, I can't profess to be an expert or to know, right? All I know is that, or from where I sit, this is fantastic, right? We've all, when I say we, I'm using the broad, the country needed an investment in infrastructure. We've seen, again, going back to just how the US DOT is putting this, right? That looking at other countries, China or many other emerging nations. I think China, there's a data point from 1998 that we stumbled across as we were looking at stuff, and it was a New York Times quote that talked about 15 to 18% investment in infrastructure leads to 8% GDP growth per year, right? So if you look at these data points, if you look at the intent behind this, right, delivering all these outcomes with equity, right? I think this is great. What I think there's also a lot of I believe sort of flexibility and unknowns in terms of how to spend the money, right? I don't mean to say unknowns like we don't know what we're doing, but it's more like, hey, how exactly do you want to spend that money on roads and bridges, right? Where do you want to spend it? And this is where, JonMichael is going to be kind of thinking about these things. And where I think Rob and I and folks like us is a broad private sector, right? It is our responsibility, I think, in part, to kind of convey the art of the possible with regards to physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. And what are the outcomes, as Rob was talking about? I think that's a great way to put it. What are the outcomes that could be better delivered through snapping these two things together?
Okay, so next, to piggyback on that, Rob, do you think that, like I said earlier, it's kind of going from old school to new school, maybe. From what you've seen in this bill and just in infrastructure investment in general, is it tech focused enough? Because you and Sajid are in the technology business, and Jason, you are too, really. That you to do things right, you have to be. So, Rob, what do you think?
So I think the bill left it open in terms of how the city wants to use this funding, how the state, how the county wants to use this funding. I think it's open enough that they can use it for smart connected infrastructure or just standard infrastructure. And I think our message is that the bill gives them the flexibility to use it for tech or not. And it's up to the city councils, it's up to the mayors, the state legislatures, the county councils to decide whether they want to, rebuild the highway from 1952 or rebuild the highway for, 2050. And we're encouraging them to start looking forward and start thinking about, as Michael said, transportation 4.0, where that, standard, steel and concrete is not where we need going forward. And the flexibility is in the bill to do that.
Okay, Jason, do you agree with that?
I do. I think that, it's the first time that we've seen something this unique, I think, in a bill too. Like usually they're extremely formulaic. And what we have this time is a level of intentionality around outcomes, and a level of openness. We've talked about openness and flexibility. The openness and flexibility for states, regions, communities to be able to leverage this funding to get started with this very generational change that has to happen. It's not like infrastructure changes overnight. And so what we're trying to do with this bill is really set in motion this transformation that has to happen in the transportation system. So Robin, chatting with it regionally with our regional partners here in Austin and surrounding communities for a while. And the focus, I think, from the perspective of giving each community, whether you're Abilene, Texas, or Austin, Texas, the ability to leverage that for the outcomes that are most intended. And that is the difference, though. If you look at the outcomes, and there's an intentionality around fixing disparities, creating an equitable transportation system, and beginning to really move towards a sustainable model of that transportation system. We have to find a way to get off of non-point source pollution and save our planet. And transportation system is quite honestly, those tailpipes are part of that.
Sajid, do you think to something Rob said earlier, it's open ended? Is that a fair statement and allows for enough technology investment?
So I would agree with Rob's positioning there. Again, let's just focus on the transportation bits, because the core infrastructure, some of it is deliberately just broadband, for example, is digital, right?
Yep.
But on the transportation side of it, it is open-ended. It's subject to interpretation. And to the point I think that Jason was making, the outcomes, the intentionality of what we want to deliver. But if you go back to the way that the US DOT and other leaders are talking about this, right? There's safety outcomes that they're looking to drive. If you look at, this concept of Vision Zero, right? There's like 46,000 people that die on US highways today, right? If you want to drive that down to quote zero, Vision Zero, right? That almost cannot be done with physical infrastructure alone, right? So these types of things, I think it's a matter of socializing, hey, the incremental benefit versus the incremental cost. Maybe having cities, states, departments of transportation, et cetera, think about, again, I know, Jason, that in conversations with Austin, that absolutely this is top of mind, but is this top of mind everywhere in the country, right? And so making available that information about, hey, what is possible, and then having the entities that are making the decisions make the call.
Okay. The last thing I want to ask, I don't want to be too open-ended about it and leave you on your own, but Jason, you can go first. Is there anything, talking about federal investment in general, the IIJA specifically, anything important that you think we missed that we haven't talked about yet that you just kind of want to, you think is important to note about how we're doing things? You've covered a lot of ground, to be honest. So
I would say that that in that graph that you had, the amount of money that's allocated for ports.
Mm-hmm.
I think since the pandemic, we realize how critical our infrastructure is in order to move goods. We've talked a lot about people. People need goods. and they need goods at an efficient rate that can, sort of hold an affordability index even in inflationary times like today. So I think that one of the things that we didn't talk about that I think is important in this whole scheme of things is that combination of cyber physical. We didn't really talk about autonomy. Congratulations, guys. We didn't bring that in the middle of our conversation, which I think is unique these days. But in that regard, how do we really get the goods moving around the United States in the ways that we need to that help support people and support their needs, especially considering that it could be a trip not taken, and a trip not taken helps balance the supply and demand that we have with our existing transportation system.
Got it. Rob, I'm going to ask you the same question. Anything else you want to, anything that touches your business or something that you've noticed that you think we need to, might want to address?
There's the dilemma that many cities have. Do we build more roads or do we build better transit systems? Well, the infrastructure bill gives us the ability to decide. Do we want to build bigger, better roads, which may be important, or do we want to improve transit? And it's been studied and noted that if people have a viable transit opportunity that lets them leave their car in the garage, jump on a light rail train or a bus or a transit, and get there potentially faster without having to navigate traffic and all the headaches of driving, that they usually will go that way. So I think one of the things I want to stress is as we look at this bill and look at how we're going to leverage this funding, I would say maybe more roads, but also more rail and more transit systems that get people for mobility.
Got it. Sajid, next I'll go to you, and I'm afraid that this is going to sneak preview your ebook too much, but I'm going to let you have the last word on this one.
Sure. Thank you. So I think in terms of this, where this is going and how this is coming together, right? I do want to say that both the guidance coming out of the public sector, this tying together of, and I've got this actually jotted down, but transportation, safety, the economy, climate, and delivering all these outcomes that are tied to transportation. You can imagine kind of a Venn diagram that, one thing overlaps the other and they all work synergistically, delivering all this with equity, right?
Yep.
I think Pete Buttigieg mentioned in the South by Southwest sort of keynote, the wrong side of the tracks is in our vernacular for a reason, right? So keeping that sort of lens in mind as we deliver all this, and this has been an exciting time working with cities, with states, with folks like Rob, just sort of brainstorming what to do, where to go, how to unfold this thing, and at the risk of sounding like I'm on a nightly talk show, read the ebook.
You're right. There you go. Sounds good. And like you said, by the time that this airs, it'll be available.
It should be available. If it's
a
not,
link right below where you're
hunt
listening.
me down.
Absolutely. Usually I plug people's websites or Twitter handles or something like that here, Rob, but I'm going to let you all do it for yourselves if that's okay. Rob, where can people learn more about what Dell is doing for cities and state and local governments, things like that?
Sure. Just go onto the Dell website and search for state and local government, and you'll be directed to various portions of the Dell website that are focused on how we support our state and local government customers. I don't have a direct link to share, but just search on state and local and you'll find it.
That sounds good. I'll make sure I'm active on Twitter doing that. Jason, how about you? We can go to the City of Texas website. I know there's some pretty good resources there. City of Austin, sorry.
Certainly, and a lot of places to go once you get there, but I would start with austintexas.gov. You can search smart city or smart mobility. You'll find your way to our side of the web sphere in that. And then from that, you can reach out and find all kinds of things, including our open data portal related to scooters, for instance, and all of the micro mobility miles that are being generated in Austin that are all done electric and without a car. And so, definitely you can even just Google Austin and smart city or smart mobility and you'll get there too.
Yeah. And Sajid, I know your website's got a lot of information about that too.
Right. So it's intel.com, and you can search for either smart cities or transportation. The ebook will be posted there. It may take a couple of weeks, is what I'm hearing from when this airs, but I'll also be posting it to LinkedIn if you care to pick it up there.
And folks, I just want to say that while I was doing my pre-show research and looking up what each of these guys do. There was some really good resources. I mean, I know, Sajid, we've been talking for a long time, but Rob, I looked on Dell's site about specifically what you do. And there's a lot of resources and examples of, customer stories and testimonials and things like that. And Jason, I know that Sajid talked about Vision Zero, and then there's some examples about some information about that on the Austin website. So if you want to learn any more about what we've talked about, it's pretty easy to find. I found it, and I found it really interesting. So, okay. So, folks, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're watching and listening. It'll help get the word out. And to learn more about HMH, the Transportation Transformation Agency, visit hmhagency.com or find us on all the usual social media platforms. Jason, Sajid, Rob, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. For Jason, JonMichael, Rob Silverberg, and Sajid Khan, I'm John Halpin. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode of HMH's Future of Transportation podcast.